How's everybody doing? Coming to you from Cartagena, Colombia today. So it's my 7th or 8th day on vacation, man. It just doesn't get any better than this. But I told everybody that I would do a video today about 1%ers in prison. And I just want to preface this with a lot of people that know me already know that, I was in prison for 27 years. But when I went to prison, I was a Hell's Angel for a couple of years. In 1996, I went to prison. So, I know a lot about, the mechanics of bikers in prison because I was there as a Hell's Angel for 27 years. I started out in Leavenworth Penitentiary. And Leavenworth Penitentiary is where I meet Spike and RV, that are two outlaws. But before we get to them, let's just talk a little bit about, the question, do bikers and 1%ers get along in prison? You always hear these things on TV and on the news and the media about, different clubs and rival clubs killing each other and acts of violence. I went to prison for an act of violence against another member of a motorcycle club. And, so do those things happen? Yes. Does the dynamic change when you're in prison? 100%. And when I got to prison and I realized this, the first person I met that was in another club was RV, and he was an outlaw. But what had happened before that, before I had met RV, was the captain came to me and was like, hey, there's an outlaw coming, and we're putting him on the line. Is there going to be a problem between you and him? And anytime they ever ask me that question, I wouldn't care who it is. I always say, absolutely not. You know what I mean? And even if there would be a problem, or there was going to be a problem, I would always just say, no problem, boss. Of course. Because everybody's just looking to get out of that situation where they're in. He was probably in the hole. He was getting a captain's review. They were ruining wondering if the conditions were going to be okay for him to get on the line. There's a lot of things that go through it. The investigators, they have to look into things. The captain is the head of security. If anything happens, it comes back on him. So he has to look into things. And I'm sure this process was, transpiring when they asked me, and I just a resounding yes, of course. And I had spoke to Kessler about it. I was like, I'd always heard stories from guys in the club that, when I was in jail, I got with another member of this club. We were friends. We used to hang out, this and that. And I always thought it was odd that, there was a different dynamic on the street. And I didn't really realize it and comprehend the dynamic until I got to prison. Your perspective changes a lot, according to the situations that you've been in life. So the dynamic had changed dramatically. Penitentiaries where I first started were extremely racially divisive. And for people that don't like to hear that, that's just the way it was. And, that's just the reality of it. Whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't have an opinion on that, but it was racially divisive in the penitentiary. So what happens is, and in these lower security institutions too, no matter where you're at, bikers get along for the most part, in my experience. So in my 27 years and my 12 institutions in the federal system, bikers always got along. As a matter of fact, as you'll hear later on in this video, two guys became really close friends of mine because of the situation we were in and, what transpired and how everybody acted that was involved. So when the captain asked me this, I'm thinking to myself, like, here comes this big white dude, right? And, he looks like this, this RV is a giant dude, right? He's a huge dude. He's from Wisconsin. And he just come over with that laugh. And he was like, hey, what's going on? And we had a great, right from the rip, we had just a great relationship, him and I. And, he was just a cool dude, right? He was there for some serious stuff. I was there for some serious stuff. Anybody that was in the penitentiary, Kessler, who we used to hang around with, Steve Kessler, he was in for some, killing a guard, escaping from Rocky Butte jail. in Oregon. I'm not sure if Spike was out at this time. Spike was another guy that was an outlaw. And there was another guy, John, that was an invader. And those four people, me included, are the ones where the story revolves around. But he just come out, and so there's tension a lot of times, and sometimes there's a lot of racial tension in prison. And here comes this big, huge white dude, right? And, you know, he has the same culture as me, same upbringing as me, you know, the same beliefs and thoughts as me. So those people unite in prison, right? Because you're in an environment where anything can happen at any time. And there's a propensity for violence in these places. Obviously, you know, and I always joke around and say these things tend to happen in the correctional setting because they do, you know. And here's a guy that is a big dude. He's on your side. You're not going to make this guy your enemy. He's a great dude. And man, the dude could cook. Yo, we ate. This guy cooked amazing. This guy was probably one of the best cooks RV, and we lived together. You know, we ended up getting the captain to put us in the same block because we hung out together, man. We became fast friends, and we hung out, man. And he was a great dude. So, and then Spike came along. That's one of his brothers. And, you know, good dude. I wasn't really as close with Spike. Spike was in the law library doing his thing. I believe both of those guys are still in prison. I believe Spike is, you know, doing a life sentence, and I believe RV is doing a life sentence too. And, you know, shout out to them guys, man, you know, and anybody that's behind the wall. It's just, my blessings are my blessings. I waited a long time, but still there's people that are never, ever going to get to feel that feeling. That's why I consider myself so blessed to be in the situation that I'm in. And, you know, so they were great guys. We got along great. And every instance, before I get to the story of what happened with us, every instance and every institution I've been in, I've been with Pagans, I've been with Outlaws, I've been with Mongols. So me and Mongol Mike were at Devon's together, man. And the head of, you know, the orderlies in the hospital, who was my boss, called both Mike and I down there, right? Me and Mike were in the same block, got along great. Mike had some medical issues going on. I got a hip replacement, but just a great dude, right? And you knew that if anything happened, he was with you 1,000%. You know, this guy wasn't running and putting his towel on the door and saying, "Oh, I didn't hear. I don't know what." You know what I'm saying? You know, Mike was there, and it's always good to have that type of guy with you in those environments, right? I mean, you know, bring your supposed, you know, so-called enemy to a place where you're in combat. And you just got the same common denominator, right? I'm saying, so you bring him to another country and he says, "Hey, I'm fighting with you." And you're like, "Thank God for the relief," you know? So Mike was a great dude, but there was an instance with me and Mike where, you know, I talk a lot about perspective, and my perspective's changed so much when this guy called us down there, the head of the orderlies, called us to the hospital, and he called us to the A unit downstairs in the basement. It's where people go to die. And he called us down there, me and Mike, we were both bikers, right? And he called us down there to see Trey. He was a pagan. And, man, he called us down there to see this guy because he was going to die, man, you know? And, man, it was just such an impactful moment because me and Mike walked into the room. And me and Mike talked on the way up. Like, we didn't talk nothing about what do you say in a situation like that? What do you do in a situation like that? You know, you just try to comfort a guy, be like, "Hey, my man, you know, I love you to death, bro." You know what I'm saying? It's just, yeah, you call a guy brother, absolutely. Guy's on his way out the door, man. Nothing matters after that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he's in the final stages of his life. So the crazy part of this story is when we walked in, you know, my boss said he's in that room over there. So we walked in. There was just sheets on the bed. There was nothing in the bed. We were like kind of looking, like we thought the guy, like, you know, set us up for something. We didn't know what was going on. And then you could hear somebody like moaning silently. And I looked closer at the sheets, and there was this guy like in a ball. Like he was, I missed him in the bed, is how small and frail this guy was. You know, he had come there for shoulder surgery from Fort Dix. Trey came there for shoulder surgery. He ended up having something going on in his eye. They found the cancer. They were giving him chemo. And, you know, he couldn't overcome it, man. And the cancer got him. And, we were in there that day, me and Mike, man, and we were just like, hey, bro, but you couldn't even talk to the guy. It was over for him. Like, he was just moaning, and he was, when they say 30 pounds, like, I couldn't even find the guy in the bed initially until I looked closer, and I thought just the sheets were wrinkled up. He was just disappearing from cancer. And it really just gave me a lot of perspective, man, about, like, all that stuff is, at that point in time, everything else didn't matter, right? There's a guy on his way out, right? There's nothing you can do for him. He's going to die. And here's a pagan that's dying, a Hell's Angel, and a Mongol, right? Paying their last respects to this guy, man. And just, you couldn't even talk to the guy. Like, he was just going, like, it was one of the most depressing moments that I've ever had in prison, and it just left me like with a hole in my like entire being for like a long period of time. And me and Mike walked out of there, and we didn't really say much, man. But I know Mike was waiting, to get some medical treatment. I really don't want to say what it was, out of respect for Mike. But I was getting my hip done, and I was just thinking I needed a replacement part, man. I went to the body shop and got a fender. Right? And, here's this guy. Just went there to get a shoulder replacement, and he come out of there with cancer. So, bikers got along that day for sure. You know what I'm saying? One gazillion%, man. And, it's just still with a hole. Like, when I think about it, like, it's just, it's just a horrible existence to have to, like, die in prison. And, you probably fought, tooth and nail, against other people that are sitting by your bedside. You were the last ones to say goodbye to the guy. And just to give you a little perspective, man, it's my perspective, you know what I'm saying? This is my experience. Right, wrong, or indifferent, agree, disagree. That was a pretty impactful moment. So before that is when I meet Spike in RV and a guy, John, who was an invader, like I said. And RV was my boy, man. RV was my guy, and I don't mean anything disrespectful by saying my boy, but he was, my guy. He was a guy I hung around with every day in the joint. He cooked, we drank together, like we did everything together. You know what I'm saying? And he would always bust my balls, I'd bust his balls, and for lack of a better term, the guy was my brother in jail. You know what I mean? Well, I still consider him my brother. I wish he would get out of jail tomorrow, and this guy could cook. We had such great times. We got drunk together, you know what I'm saying? And this guy was just a big, huge, corn-fed dude, man. And this dude was just always in a good mood. Life sentence, always in a good mood. And, he used to call me Hot Rod. Hey, Hot Rod, what are you doing today, Hot Rod? Come on, let's go get a workout, Hot Rod. He was, listen, this guy is a guy I looked up to, man. This guy was just a fucking solid dude, and just always in a great mood, got a life sentence, man. I just couldn't believe how, like, cool he was, right? So, if I hang out with you every day in jail and something good happens, I'm going to reap the benefits of it, right? Like, he cooked every day, and, I reap the benefits of that all the time. And when bad things happen, I'm with you too, you know what I'm saying? So I can't pick and choose what days I'm with you. So if I'm with you every day, I'm with you. So he had an incident with, a racialist gang. And I'll say who the guy is. It was No Nose Rick. And he's a guy from Oregon. Because Rick was just a huge personality, right? And Rick was tough guy, larger than life, great dude, right? And, I liked Rick. When Rick started drinking, it was like, oh boy, Rick's drinking tonight. You know what I'm saying? You always try to avoid Rick when he's drinking, right? But, so Rick and RV had a problem. And, Rick's guys were with Rick. RV's guys were with RV, and I was one of them, you know what I'm saying? And I still consider Rick a friend, you know what I'm saying? Without a doubt, especially with so much time passed, definitely now, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure we, that which is bitter to endure is sweet to remember, and I'm sure we have a lot of memories in common. And solid guy, great kid, tough kid. I could never say nothing bad about that. I could say a lot of bad things about a lot of people that didn't handle things right. And, so just a great dude that, listen, prison is a hotbed for violence. And sometimes, we get into wrecks. And it happens, unfortunately. But, I'm sure a lot of that stuff, there's some stuff that'll never go away, right? But there's a lot of stuff that, hey, you know what I'm saying? You got to have a short memory in these places. I say it all the time. So RV had a beef with Rick about something, and it became everybody's beef in the block, you know what I'm saying? And when I tell you, RV was just like a big, strong kid, I'll never forget the day that, all this came to, a boiling point, and there was a, situation in the TV room, the white TV room in the back. But what had precipitated that was a few things that happened that I'm really not quite sure, because things take on a life of their own in prison. But what I do remember is a couple of guys that we knew from Tennessee that were great guys that worked in the plumbing shop, sharpened up, bigger than the screen, man. They took, lawnmower blades from them walking lawnmowers and made us a murder weapon. It was a huge, huge knife. And, they knew we had a problem in the block. And when I say we, I'm saying RV was my boy. So I'm saying if he had a problem, I had a problem, right? I'm like, I can't live there no more if I'm like, RV, hey, listen, you're getting into a wreck. I'm taking a break from you. No, it just don't work that way, It does work that way for some people. And some people just, those are the people that we could talk bad about in these videos, Because if you're with somebody, you're supposed to be with somebody. It's just the way it is, especially in that environment when, you get clout from the guys you hang out with, right? So he got clout from hanging out with me. I got clout from hanging out with him, from my friends. It was just, hey, listen, these guys are whoever they are. You know what I'm saying? So you can't just take a break from being a guy's friend, And I think that transcends prison. That should be in life in general. So these guys had a problem. It came to a head, and we didn't need the knife that they had given us. RV had it tucked away wherever RV had it tucked away, and it turned out just to be a fist fight between Rick and RV, and there was not a coward in the two of them, or their friends, or RV's friends, because I remember that. I won't name his name. He was a kid from Florida. He was RV's boy. He's kind of into drugs, and he kind of did some weird shit, you know what I'm saying? But he had his hands in his pants while this fight was going on. I ran in there. Once I heard the commotion, I could feel the temperature change in the block. I just ran in there, and I knew this might be the day that it happens, right? So it was, and I ran in there, and RV and Rick were squared off, and this other dude was squared off with RV too. So I got in there, and he had his hands in his pants. He was like, like he was going to get something. I was like, yo, my man, get the fuck out of this room. You know what I'm saying? So the people that are there know what happened, and I'm not going to, pump my own horn. I'm going to just tell you exactly what happened. He was fiending like he had a knife. I don't know if he did or not. And I was like, yo, my man, get that, whatever you got in your pants, get out of here, man. Beat it, because these guys are fighting. Let these guys fight. Nobody else is jumping in. Let these guys fight. So the long story short is those guys fought. Now remember, this is about do 1%ers get along in prison. This wasn't what another biker gang. This wasn't what a 1% gang. This was what a gang, a prison gang. Precisely a prison gang. Not anybody that was involved in the 1%er world. The people that were involved in the 1%er world were with RV. And, I can speak for myself, and I know John too. We had taken a picture together afterwards, and RV was like, man, I appreciate you guys' help. You know what I'm saying? You guys are solid stand-up dudes. But it's something that, happens in jail. So anyway, these guys square off. When I say that RV was like a big dude, those 1950 boxers, they don't square off like this. They go, and they just throw their hands in a very awkward way. But RV was doing that, but he was throwing it and it was hitting boom. He was crushing. He was like an oak tree, this guy, But I was fascinated by the way he squared off and his way of fighting. He didn't have his hands up like this. He just put one hand here and boom, 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 But it was effective because there was a good fight. Him and Rick had a good fight, and you know what I'm saying? They fought like men, and everything kind of turned out okay after that. You know what I'm saying? People in jail, it's, hey, like I say all the time, you got to have a short memory, right? And we're all kind of in the same car and in the same boat because it was a penitentiary. It was Leavenworth Penitentiary, and it's a very racially divisive place. So white people usually stick together, black people stick together, Puerto Ricans, Spanish, Mexicans, you know, and then it kind of fragments off a little bit. If something serious goes on, there's people that group up with other groups, you know what I'm saying? So, and that's just the dynamic of prison. I'm not making a judgment call, right? I'm just making an observation. And I figure that I have enough experience and credibility to talk about that and the dynamic of that. So, do bikers get along in prison? My experience is 100% they do. You know, and shout out to Diamond Danny that passed away on a motorcycle accident. He's one of my guys, and he had a great relationship with Conan, who was a pagan in prison. You know, and those guys were together every day. They were like best of friends. And, you know, if you know, you know, guys will know. And so just to, you know, what I'd like to say is, you know, to end this video with, I think we should take a page out of prison for people in the 1% world and in the biker world. Because I remember, you know, I went to prison for, you know, thinking I was doing the right thing and acts of violence against people in other gangs and stuff. And when I got there, we all hung out together. So, you know, my reaction to that was, why did I do what I did to get here? I mean, I'm not going to minimize that I sold drugs. I would have had a 20-year sentence as well, just for selling drugs, right? So, but the things against other gangs, I say to myself now, like, hey man, I was in like war zones, and these guys were my friends. And, you know, probably guys from every club I had been friends with along the way. And the ones that I mentioned today were my closest friends. And especially with RV and Spike, man, I wish them the best of luck. Somebody had reached out to me to write a letter for RV and Spike. I never heard nothing back from them. I will do anything I can for those guys. If there's anything that can be done on my end, I will do it. And I have no problem doing it. If you're friends with them and they need something, reach out to me. It's very easy to reach out to me, and I'm 100% down to do whatever I can in my power. And if you guys like this video, comment on it, share it, subscribe to this channel. And that's it for today from Cartagena, Colombia.